Hey, Dr. Robinson-Winemiller here again, talking about all things leadership, emotional intelligence, and empathy. I am so excited with the guest that we have this week. She is not only a leader in her own right and has been for decades, but she's the one that helps tell the leaders how to be better leaders, how to promote themselves, and how to get their messages out into the world. Her name is Nadya Rousseau, and I'm so excited to have her in the studio today. So let's give her a big hand. Nadya, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for the intro. I don't know if I've been a leader for decades. I'm only 38, but it feels like decades though. Oh my God.
Right? Some decades feel like longer decades than others. So I think it counts. Sometimes they're
it does. It does for sure. Well, thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Well, thank you for being here. And I'm really excited to have you because I really want quality people who really understand what they're about and bring their influence to the world. So you're precisely the kind of guest that I want to have. So thank you for being here today. I'd like to start by having you just kind of introduce yourself a little bit, in a nutshell, and what you bring to the world.
Okay, I love that. Well, double cap, rising Pisces, Venus, and Scorpio.
Excellent.
Right? There's a lot going on just right there in and of itself. But yeah, my name is Nadya Rousseau. I'm the founder and CEO of Alternate Media. We're a purpose-driven marketing and media company, primarily serving mission-driven and disruptive companies with achieving their goals while making a difference in the world and shaking things up in the process. So we do that through our productized marketing and PR services, through the ecosystems that we build, and through co-created media. I've been in the space since about, I want to say late 2017. Initially, I founded the company as a digital production house for a TV series I was producing and hosting called Nadya's Identity Files out of LA. It was a weekly episodic show with 2 to 3 guests. It was a lot of work. And so I needed to establish an LLC for sponsorship acquisition. And at that time, I had also been kind of moonlighting in the marketing space. Prior to that, I was an actor and model and freelance writer and editor for a number of years. So everything came together by late 2017 and launched a service called Instagram Rockstar, which really took off. It was the time of Instagram growth and when that was super popular. So that helped really kind of put the fuel in the tank, to say the least. And now we've served over 1,000 companies worldwide. I co-lead the business with my beautiful wife, Lauren Jones. We're here in Vegas. Prior to that, LA 14 years, and grew up in Western Maryland. So hopefully that encapsulates all the things pretty well.
Wow. See, I think that's just in listening to what you have to say, because somehow we have this idea that leadership comes in big chunks. I've been a leader with so-and-so for 400 years since the beginning of time or whatever. But when I'm listening to you, what I hear is I bring this depth of experience from all these different things to the table. And that's why I do what I do in a way that no one else can do it. And being kind of a Renaissance woman myself, where I feel like I'm pulling from a lot of different places, I happen to think that's important, especially in a day and age where we kind of have to be able to do things quickly, and we have to not only spread our skills deep, but wide. So I'm just excited to hear that in your own words. So thank you.
Yeah.
So here's a question for you on leadership in particular, because for those who don't know me, that's my jam. I talk about leadership and what happens when we don't have empathy and emotional intelligence there and all the problems that can arise. So as you're dealing with so many different people and so many different personalities in what you do, do you feel that in being able to deal with these people that you have to be able to use a healthy dose of emotional intelligence, which I'm going to assume the answer is yes? And if so, how do you feel empathy in terms of not necessarily empathy in feeling what another person is feeling, but empathy as far as how we connect with each other as human beings plays a part?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super critical. It's like very, very important. Empathy is at the root of emotional intelligence. I don't think that you can be emotionally intelligent without possessing empathy. I would say, to be honest, in my experience, I have struggled with maybe going too far with my empathetic qualities. I have often put myself in others' shoes to the detriment of myself and just wanting to always serve others ahead of myself. It has, to be completely frank, it's cost us, a lot of money over the years, a lot of time. I've had to really cultivate boundaries around my empathy and just sharpen, I guess, my skills around empathy, which I don't think that's really something a lot of people know that that's something they should do. And I remember a while ago, I was at this talk and I think it was where was I? I think it was Barnard in New York. It was some university in New York City. It was very interesting. It was talking in like the case against empathy, but it wasn't like technically really against empathy. It was more so against the idea that you literally have to be in another person's shoes to be empathetic or to have care and concern for that individual. And I remember having such a visceral reaction to that talk. I was so angry by it. I was like, of course you have to be in another person's shoes. Like, what is this guy talking about? He's an asshole. And I am like, now after, and that was back in like 2017 or 2018, I think. It was before, my company has evolved and I've had all of these experiences where I feel like people have maybe taken advantage of my kindness, but at the same time, I've let them. I've had come to understand that, you have to have these skills, and having a good EQ is not just being like empathy with no boundaries at all. So that's what I've really learned over the years.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a fantastic point. People that do naturally have empathy and display it do tend to go over the top because we almost expect it to be reciprocated. But we do tend to learn the hard way that it isn't that way with everyone. And I think you make the point that you have to be able to engage your emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence isn't just understanding other people's feelings, it's understanding and controlling your own. So the two go hand in hand to be able to use your empathy for yourself to engage your emotional intelligence so you don't end up with empathy fatigue.
Wow.
Especially for those of us that just naturally go in that direction.
Yeah, and I know for a fact that you've been there too. And I'm sure like through all of this deep work that you've done and becoming an expert in this, you've like refined your own like EQ and your emotional intelligence around, taking care of yourself. And it's still, not easy. It's like we have to check ourselves. And I think that's where I've struggled the most, like having empathy for myself. It's like, nope, like, you got to put yourself last. But I mean, of course, that comes from like weird childhood stuff and, all the things that you just become increasingly self-aware of as you grow as a human and as a leader.
Absolutely. Yeah. I actually think you make a good point there as well, because a lot of the research I've done, it never really talks about self-empathy. Mm-hmm. And I really think this is a thing, because if we can't actually have empathy for ourselves, how could we ever have it for anybody else? Not really, because there's a difference between being able to have those healthy boundaries and just kind of laying it all out and then suffering for it later. So, exactly. I appreciate you mentioning that, because I think it's important.
So important. It's been like one of the great, biggest lessons, TBH.
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of the leaders that I have worked with, people are always like, well, can you teach empathy? And well, if someone absolutely has no empathy, yeah, there is actually a little bit that you can do to make it skills-based, as you mentioned, and actionable, but you can't really teach them to feel something else. But in my experience, there's as much of a problem the other way with people that don't know how to use the empathy that they have and end up, suffering for it.
Right. And then it can breed or can, turn into resentment when it's not reciprocated.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, exactly. Yes. See, I knew you were going to be a leader after my own heart. This is what I like to hear about. So you did use another word that's near and dear to my heart because you mentioned serving others. And in that
Yes.
service, not losing yourself. We talk a lot, servant leadership is a very buzzy word right now. We hear about it all the time. And maybe you define yourself as a servant leader or maybe not at this point. I'd like to dig into that a little bit deeper and get your views on that since it's a popular term, but I hear it being misused a lot. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of an odd term in a way because it's like, of course, like you want to be of service and you want to serve the best interests of your team. But then when it's like written out as a servant leader, it's as though you are a servant suddenly to your team. And again, it gives the impression or alludes to putting yourself like always on the back burner and that your boundaries and your goals and mission of like the business no longer matter. So a lot of people, like other leaders, have described me based off, everything that they know and hear about my leadership style and how I engage with the team and with other people as being like servant leadership, just because I am very passionate about service. But again, with that word, like the servant aspect, like it just kind of gives me like the creeps. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I kind of agree actually, because it just, to me, it really does fold into the empathy thing. Because if you're trying to understand and connect with other people, I think there's that natural want to serve, or at least serve the community or serve society or that sort of thing. But when people throw the word servant leader out there, you get that idea that it's kind of your job to just give in, almost like an ill-used mother. You're just supposed to give in to
Yeah,
everything.
exactly. And I have very maternal qualities. I'm not a mother yet, but I am very maternal in my nature. And I also think people start to get habituated to that too, almost as though like, oh, like mom is gonna go like, do my laundry or make the bed, or like, oh, Nadia's just gonna like jump in and do that thing like because I don't get it. So, oh well, like let me just like keep getting paid or whatever. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I find it an interesting comparison between the empathy and the servant, because the two kind of go together, but not in terms of being, I don't want to say as a doormat, but as a doormat. The other,
right.
and the other part too, a lot of servant leaders that I feel are really truly being of service are teachers, educators, people
Yes.
that want to help other people learn and bring them with them. And you and I have worked together now. And I love what we do. I love the way it's all coming together. But I do feel that there's a certain teacher student mentality in some of that, in that you're
Mhm.
like, okay, now we're going
Yeah.
to do this and it needs to happen like this. And so as
Right.
far as the servant leader goes, with that educative quality, um,
Yes.
I
I
appreciate
think
that a
that's when
lot.
it's done right, for sure. That's when it's being done the right way, like coming through and like trying to illuminate and empower and educate. I mean, I grew up in a household of professors, so I was definitely like ensconced in like being the forever student, although I was also thrown like you're gonna like co-teach and help grade these papers now, like when I'm in high school. But like it was always around.
Well, I do appreciate that about you in particular, and about people that I really do see as servant leaders. They have that quality. So I can't imagine grading papers in high school is much fun, but
It was for a remedial English class too. And now this, oh, not to throw anyone under the bus too much, but I mean, I'll never forget this moment. I'm like 16 years old. I'm in this like remedial college class. My mother was working as an adjunct professor at that time. My dad was full-time philosophy and ethics professor. She was adjunct. And like, this is a group of like early to late 20s, some early 30s people, they're in the remedial English class. And she's like, my daughter here, like she's in 10th grade or 11th grade, and she helped grade your papers. And I'm just thinking at the time, without having cultivated a lot of skills around like empathy and like these things, I just felt like, oh my gosh, like how like humiliating for these people.
Yeah, but you had enough
But at
empathy
the same
to know.
time, I was also kind of gloating a little bit inside. I'm not going to lie.
Well, I mean, empathy is great, but teenage girls,
Right.
You got to know what you're working with there.
Right. But I felt bad mostly. It was like, oh my, like this is embarrassing.
Yeah, but on the other hand, they were taking a leap to try and better themselves. Sometimes
Exactly.
you have to just be humble and understand when people are trying to help you from whatever
Right.
direction that may come. You
Right.
have a 10th girl.
Yeah, totally.
Is there anything that you would like to add to the conversation? Anything that you would like to get out to the audience? Anything that you would like to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just such an interesting time. Like you are like talking about these issues at probably like the most perfect time, because on one side, I think we definitely like as a human collective need to cultivate more empathy for one another, for our differences, and not just like external differences, but differences in thought, and just really try to garner a greater understanding of where people are coming from and their perspectives, but of course still holding those boundaries. I think that's so important. But then on the other side, there are people who see the word empathy and inclusivity and a lot of these like words, servant leader, like all of these things that we're seeing as being very buzzworthy, and they're just kind of like virtue signaling with it, or trying to make it appear that they are the most like enlightened and most caring, but then beneath the surface there is not really that care. It's almost as though like they're weaponizing these terms just because people are more aware that they exist now, and they always have been. It's just there wasn't a terminology necessarily to describe it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that very, very much. And I couldn't agree more. I personally feel that we are at a turning point in society and in our culture. And I'm not the only one. There's a lot of researchers out there that point to a rise in the the behavioral states of people that have no empathy, which by definition are narcissists, psychopaths, sociopaths. The fact that
Yep.
we're getting more and more of those people in our society with zero empathy says we need to change something, and we need to do it soon.
Right. And I will say this also, a lot of people have the concern that with like the proliferation of AI tools, that empathy and compassion for one another will continue to diminish. But I'll tell you this, some of the chat, like custom GPTs I've configured and developed have shown me more empathy and care than a real live human being. And I think that is scarier than the tools themselves, or like it just shows that people as people need to show up and be better.
Yes, I agree. Well, there's also always this pendulum shift, right? So the more we're looking at machines and technology and AI that supposedly has less empathy than people, the more the people that can harness the empathy and the emotional intelligence are going to be in demand. They're going to be the ones in the future that can really use these skills that people are going to want. It's going to be high value.
Right. And Gen AI, it's really just a mirror of how you are inserting your commands and your requests. So if you talk to your GPT or what your Claude or whatever tool that you're using in a way that sounds like passionate, exhibits care, you're going to get that mirrored back. But unfortunately, because we see so much of a diminishment in care from like the overall population, and that's who's going to be utilizing these tools, that's where my concern comes in. It's not the tools themselves. They're simply a tool. Like AI is narrow AI. It's not like these are algorithms. This is not like sentient or even near sentient yet. It's simply a mirror due to, how these algorithms have been built.
Yes. And very good point. It's a tool, and a tool is only as good as the person using it.
Exactly.
So,
yep.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. And I appreciate you saying that, because not everybody buys into that fact. And I think it's important to reiterate that as much as possible.
Yes. I would agree with that.
Yeah. All right. One final question for you, because you have been amazing and I've been really happy to have you. I would like you to tell me about one person in your life in a leadership position or someone that you look up to as a leadership mentor that's had an impact on you and why.
Oh, for sure. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and grab her book right now. It's like above me. So Sherry Winn, she is a leadership coach. This is her 7 secrets to being a truly powerful leader. She is amazing. So she's a former Olympic athlete and leadership coach. She recently did, I think it's been her second talk now for McDonald's, for leaders at McDonald's. And she is just, I've been working with her and collaborating. I want to say like maybe a little over 2 years now. And she's worked with me individually. She's worked with me and Lauren. She's worked with team members. And like, she's really helped cultivate a sense of self-awareness. She's helped me realize where I have like savior complexes. Again, going back to when empathy can be toxic and a detriment to yourself if you're not harnessing it the right way. So just like the level of self-awareness that she's helped instill in me has been so supportive, and we've become great friends. I've helped her with some PR stuff over the years. And again, she's helped me with this, leadership support, and we just have each other's backs. And she's just such a great human being and very, very self-aware to the point where it's like, she and I can have a conversation where we're like, oh, we observed this issue in ourselves. And we're like, we got to like check it and kind of be like, okay, I'm aware of this and I can redirect that conversation. So it's like, if you are trying to cultivate a greater sense of awareness around your problems, past habits and stuff like that, you just have to not like be a masochist about it. Cause I have in the past, like, oh, like you're going back down that rabbit hole and I'm going to shame myself about that. So instead just being like, I'm noticing this and, it happened and now I'm going to redirect. So for anyone that needs an excellent leadership coach who's in the C-suite, definitely Sherry Winn is your gal for sure.
Perfect. Awesome. Because I love hearing about people that do things right and have that kind of impact on others. So, Nadya, thank you so much for being here today. The business is Alter New Media. Definitely check it out. Nadya is amazing. Her wife, Lauren, is amazing. And I hope that she'll be willing to come back with us as we get things up and rolling and we can check in how things are going.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation. I mean, I could talk about these matters for hours, to be honest. And of course, everyone, be sure to follow Dr. Melissa, and she has a book coming out soon. So stay tuned.
Absolutely. Like, subscribe, follow, and we will see you all for the next episode.